Great. Hi, everyone. We're just letting everyone come into our Zoom webinar. See the numbers going up. This is great. We're in for a real treat tonight. Hi, my name is Courtney Waring, and I'm the Director of Education at the Eric Carle Museum of Picture Book Art. Thank you so much for joining us for our Why Wordless conversation with Matthew Cordell, Barbara Lehman, Chris Raschka, and David Wiesner. This is our second Why Wordless program. The first, we had Raul Colon, Molly Bang, Marla Frazee, Eric Roman, and David Wiesner. That was recorded, and it can be found on the Carle's YouTube page, and we'll share a link in the chat for you if you want to watch that later. Tonight's program is also being recorded, so if you miss any part or if you'd like to share it with a friend, we should have it on our YouTube channel in the next week or two. And before we begin, I just have a few things to share. First, we love to hear from our participants, so feel free to use the chat button, say who you are, say where you're connecting from, share with us what your favorite wordless picture book is. We'd love to hear it. Throughout the program, keep an eye on the chat. You'll see my Carle colleague, David Feinstein. He is going to be very active in the chat, sharing resources and links for all of you. And please use the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen if you have questions during the program. We'll have some time at the end to have our artists respond to those questions. If we experience any technical difficulties and get cut off, we'll try to get back online as soon as possible, and you can use the link shared in your Zoom reminder to reconnect with us. And now onto our program. Currently on view at the Carle is the exhibition Speechless, the Art of Wordless Picture Books. Curated by David Wiesner, Speechless presents a 90-year history of graphic storytelling and examines how the wordless genre has developed over time. Speechless closes this Sunday, December 4th, and we are thrilled to welcome guest curator David Wiesner and three artists represented in the exhibition, Matthew Cordell, Barbara Lehman, and Chris Raschka, and listen in as they talk about their work, share their creative process, and ask each other questions. So I'm going to hand it over to you, David, so we can get started. Hi.
Hi, Courtney. Thanks so much. It's great to be back doing this again. We had a great time a couple of weeks ago when we did the first version. Before we get into it, I just have to say again, my thanks to the Eric Carle Museum for giving me the opportunity to curate this exhibition. It's something that I I think I wanted to do, but I really knew I wanted to do it is when they asked me. It was just absolutely. I had been sort of building up for several years of collecting material and just researching the whole history of wordless storytelling just on my own, trying to think, what am I going to do with this? And the phone rang one day and now I had something to do with it. So it was really just like a dream come true to be able to showcase these books, which, you know, when they called, as fast as it took me to write them down is how I came up with who's in the show. I mean, some things we couldn't get, sadly, but I immediately, you know, there was this collection that I wanted to be able to showcase, to be able to put on the walls, you know, just to give more exposure to the genre, to those books, and particularly to the art, which we're going to be talking about making books because that is what our art ultimately does. It's a book to be read, picked up. It's graphic design, it's typography, it's so many things that come together. But the pictures are, you know, essentially one part of that process, one part of that bigger picture. But they're so beautiful parts. You know, the parts are so great to be able to take them and actually walk up and see how everyone does what they do is really inspiring. So you only have 3 more days. If you're in the area and you've been thinking of going to see it, go see it. There's just some beautiful stuff there. And so again, thanks to the museum, to Alex, Rebecca, and especially Ellen Kiter, who you know, shepherded me through this process. And it was really, really exciting. You think, what, exciting? Really? Yes. You know, where's the art? Where is this book? Who's got those pictures? Can we find it? Will they lend it? You know, when someone said, yes, we found it, and said, yes, you can use it, it was just like, you know, it was like Christmas and New Year's all rolled into one. So it was a very cool experience. And Ellen was incredibly patient and generous with her knowledge, taking me through it. So the question I ask whenever I run into someone I know who makes wordless books is why? Why did you do that? What was it about the story? What was it that made you say this should be done without words? And sometimes it's by example. I saw wordless storytelling, particularly in college, but a little bit before. And, you know, I make pictures and it was like, wow,
Yeah.
where are books? Just pictures, you know, I got to do that. I have to do that. And the examples I was seeing were not for kids. So, you know, there's Jim Steranko in 1968 and Mobius in Heavy Metal Magazine and Max Ernst, A Week of Kindness in the 1940s, Edward Gorey's The West Wing, my favorite book in the world.
Uh-huh.
And then finally, the pièce de résistance was Lynd Ward, and he and the other woodcut artists from the 30s and 40s. And, you know, when I began to make picture books and started to think that I was going to write my own, it never occurred to me not to make them wordless. And so that's where I started. And then I found out, oh, there's other people making wordless picture books too, and discovered Anno and Peter Spear and Molly Bang, Tana Hoban. And in fact, you know, there were others. So, you know, it's been interesting. And the story I told last time I'll throw out again really quickly is I asked Mercer Mayer why in 1967 he made A Boy, a Dog, and a Frog. Later, some sequels to that. But, you know, that was on the very early curve of wordless picture books. And he said he had done all these drawings. He didn't really know what to do with them or how to write a story. And he took them to his editor and he said, you know, what do I do with this? And she said, it's a wordless book. So, and Raoul Colin told the same story, that it was his editor who really was the one who said, he said, you know, got rid of his text and said, no, you don't need that. Let's do it wordlessly. So it was a long preamble, and we're going to begin by asking why. And I'm going to pick Chris just because you're a fabulous writer as well as, you know, a wonderful artist. You know, you've written chapter books, I know of one, as well as picture books. You know, really, you know how to write. So what was the thing that said all of a sudden, here's this book I'm going to tell without the words?
Well, I've always loved woodcuts as well, and the whole tradition of the wordless woodcut picture book. And I guess I have to say, I hope that I am first and foremost an illustrator. And as an illustrator, I think the greatest challenge is to do a narrative story that continues over the course of a book without words. So I had been working for a number of years before I tried it, and it was kind of a conscious decision to just go ahead. Though I'd done some books, very minimal words, I did want to, I guess, test myself and try to do it strictly with images and see what would happen. And now I love them very much as well. I think they're just, every wordless picture book is so powerful because it just relies on the images, and you have to move into the book that way.
Were you aware of?
I was aware of your books.
Like how kids respond to them, you know, what, because that was for me, you know, I was doing it because, you know, this was sort of my artistic, I want to do that.
Yeah.
Because I love that as a form. And then all of a sudden, you know, kids were writing me letters, you know, I was getting teachers and librarians and stuff. And you start to see how they're reading the books, and that was really eye-opening.
Yeah.
You know, who knew? And so it's, I mean, it's a really different way to experience a book.
Yeah, and in a way, a wordless picture book, I think, demands interaction. If there's a grown-up in the room showing the book, that grown-up really has to be involved. And I think there have been been some research that shows that wordless picture books actually promote the vocabulary even more than a worded book, because the vocabulary comes in the response to the pictures and so forth. And for me, I had a wonderful letter from a family in Amsterdam after Ball for Daisy came out, and just that the child in the family, who was, I think, 2.5, loved that book. And it was such a delight to know that, you know, it doesn't matter where it comes out. You have that lovely transcontinental ability once you've done a wordless picture book.
Oh, that's interesting in Amsterdam, because years ago, when I got my foreign edition of Tuesday from there, we opened it up and it was full of words.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was like, what?
Yeah.
So we had to send a letter to the publisher and go, what is this? Why is it there? And they said, well, we didn't think the audience would get it. And, you know, could have just said, okay, if you reprint, don't do that again, please. You know, but
Wow.
That happened to me with my Yo Yes, which is just one word on a page. And when it went to Japan, there was like a paragraph on each page. No idea what was going on. But.
Right. So, Barbara, on the other hand, you do nothing but wordless books. You know, even, you know, the rest of it, I certainly, there are times I've got stories where I go, you know, the words actually can be useful. And, you know, some stories just say, you know, I need words for this, but you've maintained up until also, this is just way too cool. Lots of dialogue, but, you know, it's all pictures, pictograms. So that was, when I first saw the cover, I thought, oh, has she written? There's a text of sorts. So how did you, I know you've told me, but I'm blanking on the full story, how you came to wordless books.
So first, my first experience with books was illustrating other people's stories. And then I wanted to try my hand at writing a book myself. And when I showed it to someone I knew in the industry, they looked it over and they said, you know, have you ever thought of trying this wordlessly? And I think it was an early version of the Red Book. And I think it was because of the content specifically, because I was trying to describe some rather complex things happening. And so I think the advice came because of the content. But the moment he said it, I felt such an affinity to the idea. I was so eager to just wipe out the words and go back and see what it was like to do it wordlessly. And I was very motivated to make that change. I just loved the puzzle aspect of figuring out making a book work wordlessly. So for me, it started with the content, then somebody making the suggestion, and then me liking the suggestion. But, you know, you mentioned the boy, the dog and the frog. Like, I loved those books when I was a kid. And I did wordless things in high school, also in college, but somehow I wasn't making the connection with me doing it for picture books until someone else said it. So that was how I ended up doing the wordless books. And then once I did it, I guess I became this huge convert, because I absolutely love people's responses to the books. I love the variety of interpretations. I love that the strange interpretations they all tend to work out as a story really well. So I love the amount of, I think, audience participation and when you read a wordless book, I think there's a bit of a different, maybe a different part of your brain is being used, but I do think that it brings something out in the child who's reading that book.
Yeah.
I love those the Mercer Mayer books when I was a kid, but I really thought of them just as stories that I enjoyed. So I didn't
Right.
necessarily think wordless. I don't know if kids really make the difference as much as adults do.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. You're. I wonder that too. Yeah. If you asked a kid, of a certain age, they would tell you the story, but if you ask them were they reading it or were they, was there text? I could imagine there would be kids who probably have to stop and go, huh, you know, yeah, it's a lot more amorphous at that point. So Matt, where did you?
Same question.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think maybe like all of us here, I started out as an illustrator only. And so writing to me was something I was kind of afraid to do for a while, or at least I felt like I wasn't going to be good at it, because I've always been drawing my whole life, so I could make a picture, but the idea of making a story using words, that was more intimidating to me. But it was also, much more challenging to me to try to write a story with words. So my first several books were not wordless. I was trying to do something that I hadn't done before. So as much as I loved wordless books early on in my career, I think I really wanted to see if I could bang out a story with words and become a writer, and an illustrator. And a few books in, I did a book called Hello, Hello, which was almost wordless itself. It was really just using the word hello
Mhm.
in different ways. There was a little bit of dialogue in it too, so also with the word hello. But it was sort of, I think, a transition for me into just going completely wordless. My first, I guess, purely wordless book, Wolf in the Snow, was not wordless when it began. I was writing with, exposition, dialogue, and I was working on it a lot, without a contract. So I was just making this thing that I wanted to get published, but there was no money behind it. But I was showing it to my illustrator author friends here in Chicago area, and just I don't really do much of that. I don't know if you guys do. I have lots
Yes.
of friends who are authors and illustrators, but I don't really like ask for input on things. Sometimes I like to get the input. Sometimes I just like to kind of keep it contained to me and my
Yeah.
editor, art director.
Yeah, writers do
But
this all the time, and I it's like, what are you, nuts?
yeah,
What?
yeah. I mean, I think for the right project, it can really be helpful, I think. And this was a project I was really struggling with, Wolf in the Snow. It was a book, and it was a dummy that went on for about a year, really, until I felt like it was ready to show to my editor at Macmillan. And all along I was working on other books that were paying the bills. But it's sort of on the back burner was this book that I was really struggling with, and I was taking it to my illustrator friends and asking them for what, because sometimes it's good to kind of, if you're struggling with something, I think, to hand it to a fresh pair of eyes. Or so people kept saying, why are you explaining this? You're over explaining these things, and I was kind of extracting words with every dummy until it really made sense. With the book itself is about two characters that don't speak to each other, a girl and a wolf, and they're also in complete isolation, a snowy sort of void. So it really made sense that this needed to be a wordless book. And wordless books have a quality that they have an immediate drama, I think, because nothing is explaining what's happening on the page. So you kind of wrap your own experiences around what that story is. So I think a wordless book can really heighten the drama of a story. And this was sort of a, it's probably one of the more dramatic stories I've told. So it really just kept making more and more sense to evolve this into a wordless book. So I did one other wordless book since then, and it didn't really, I felt like Wolf in the Snow needed to be a wordless book. I did another wordless book called Explorers, and that didn't need to be a wordless book, but I just loved making Wolf in the Snow so much that I wanted to just make another wordless book. So yeah, I really loved it so much. Figuring out the puzzle of bookmaking is very different with a wordless book, because you don't have that sort of skeletal framework of explaining what's happening on the page. So you really have to be very calculated and overanalyze almost what you're saying with your pictures, because
the text is there and gives you the structure. You can move it around a little bit, and the words will always, people will always go to the words first, and
right.
So it sets up what you're seeing, and when you take that out, it's really, that's what's really cool is, within the page, you have to get this information across and the emotion across, and gosh, it's always this, I always think in terms of double page spreads. On these 2 pages, I want this to happen because I'm thinking of the page turn, what's going to go. And, and there's certain key points that are going to show up in the book. And, I know this spread has got this moment. And it's like, what's happening over here is like, well, maybe I can just bump a little over to the next page. I'm like, no, you can't. It's got to end on that page, because when you turn the page,
right,
the reader you're giving them this, and you got to go back to that page and, okay, what can I take out? How can I condense the information? What's really, really important? And, you're losing stuff you love sometimes. And it's
or you can add 8 more pages to make that page turn still
you went
happen.
to 48 pages with Wolf in the Snow, which is like, whoa, that's really cool. And I love, because you have the ability to then come out to these overview shots with the figures very small, and we see the entire landscape. It's like we step back, and you're always letting us know where they are. You can see the houses in the background and the wolves over here. But I love that suddenly, that aerial, almost like aerial view of, here's where you are. And in a 32 or 40 page book, you're often, space, all the real estate is so valuable. It's, you have to portion it out incredibly judiciously. And Barbara, I'm intrigued because, you were talking about in the Red Book, maybe we'll do a screen share. Before I forget about it again, I apologize again to Marla and Eric. Last time I forgot to let them screen share. In the Red Book, as you said before, it's really complex stuff, and how succinctly you have these 2 characters who reach that moment where they're viewing themselves through the book, essentially making this connection over distance. And it's so perfectly simple, and the way it's laid out, that couldn't have been easy. I think those are the pages we have. So I'm going to, or some of them, do a screen share and let you talk through what you were thinking about as you were doing it. Is that okay?
Yeah.
See if I do this correctly this time. Yes, there we go.
Okay, so where we are here is a bit into the book, and a girl has found a book in the snow, and she's always been seen up to now sort of like a small figure. This is sort of a close-up, and she's finally got a chance to look at the book, and we're looking over her shoulder. So we're sort of invited to see from her perspective and share her excitement and what's in this book. So we have the single page, and then we go to the 4 panels, and this is meant to read quickly because it's very obvious from piece to piece that you're zooming in and you see this other child. So I think this is a special moment with the girl. She's able to open the book, and then we kind of quickly go to this zoom, and then we want to see what happens next. So now we have a lot of white space, a different color palette, more warm colors and soft shapes. And here's this kid, he finds a red book like she did, and then he opens it, and like her seeing what turned out to be his island, now he's looking into what we've already seen in the beginning of the book as her city. So, and I definitely wanted to make this a different feeling spread. This is the first time we're at his island, so it looks very different. Also, it's not snowing. So then when we go to the next spread, we're back in the city palette. Now it's his view of zooming in, and he's seeing her on the one side with the panels. He's seeing her looking at her book with him inside of it. So then when we go to the next page, which of course you'll see all at once when you see the spread, this is the first time where we see the girl's face up close. We really see their reactions. They're both realizing that they can see each other. They're basically like in a Zoom meeting. They can see each other. And they're breaking down the fourth wall here, is that they're looking at each other, but they're looking at us. So it creates this, I think, a bit of an intense in a good way moment for the viewer, that what's happening is momentous, but you also feel like this jarring thing is these kids that have been smaller or doing their own thing are now looking at us. So I feel like just all these little decisions are the types of things that help forward the narrative in a situation where you can't add a lot of description and you have to rely on what people feel when they look at the pictures and how that creates a story. So everything, the color, the overall design, is it crowded, is it sparse? I feel like it adds to how people then interpret the story. So I feel like as an illustrator of wordless books, yeah, every single little thing becomes important and becomes like a possibility to help convey the story.
Yeah.
So.
I'm going to throw in, because I couldn't resist the next page after that.
Oh, I'm glad you put that one in.
Because yeah, again, it jumps back out, to the two of them.
I also, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Love how, Barbara, kind of the play with windows. There's windows all over the place, and we're always looking into windows, and there are always little stories happening within windows, especially if you live in a city or you're walking down a street, you see so many stories happening just briefly in a window. And this book is so much about that. I think it's really beautiful.
Thank you.
And in the gallery, it was fun to just point out to people, the book is square. These images are square with the borders, the 4 panels, these squares, and that negative space between them, and then you come back out and repeat that. And then the frame of the window, which mirrors the negative space of the, between the panels on the other page, the whole, and, the longitude and latitude and the map. I mean, just from a design standpoint, it's just like, oh, it's just all of a piece in it. The reader may not, understand or notice this, but it's what makes it all fit so perfectly. With, it just heightens the choices you've made with the imagery itself from the design of the book. It's gorgeous.
And I feel like it's great if people don't exactly notice it the way, movie music is supposed to be good if you don't notice it, but it sort of affects you.
Yep.
Right. So yeah, oh, thanks. That was great. I love hearing the granular stuff. Let's, who wants to, Matt, you want to share next?
Yeah.
Sure, yeah. 1 second. Okay, so I just have a few spreads of Wolf in the Snow to share. The story at its heart is pretty simple. You know, it's like a girl gets lost, a wolf pup gets lost. They help each other get unlost. So
can I ask, were you aware, or I to me it's like a contemporary Blueberries for Sal.
I've heard that. Yeah, I've heard
Oh,
that.
okay.
I
mean,
think it's sort of a, you know, in a way it's almost like a, I don't know, like a reciprocal sort of Amos and Boris, you know, somebody, one helps the other, lion and mouse, that sort of thing. So in a way it's pretty simple. So I wanted to throw like so much visual variety at the story as I could. Let me see if I can. Okay, so I'm just going to jump ahead to when the girl and the wolf first find each other, and they find each other. It's already snowed in at that point, so they're lost. They're both lost. They discover each other under these trees, and they are sort of freaked out by each other. So this is very close up, this moment, you know, because this is it's a bonding moment. So we have this close up drawing, and then full spread, and then we go to the next spread. And I use a lot, you know, I grew up on comic books, so I love sequential art, you know, so I do a lot of sequential things already in my book. So I was trying to do things sequentially on spreads in different designs. So this was sort of an open like vignette type sort of sequence here, where the girl puts the pup into the snow, realizes it's not going to be able to take care of itself. The pup howls, and off in the distance she hears another wolf howling in return. The next spread is when we pull back. This is probably the most panoramic spread of the whole book, where I did really want to show the vastness of the situation. You know, there's no homes around. The ground is totally blanketed by snow. It's so deep that even the footprints look blue. You know, they don't look like the earth beneath them. And still we hear the howling. You see the howling off in the corner of that wolf, so she's following that howling. And then this is a thing that I use a lot in my books. I think you can really show the passage of time with like a broken up grid like this, like you can, like in comics, I think, where if you have, I actually had, you know, probably twice as many panels on here in the original sketches, but my editor was telling me, you know, weed it out a little bit, because it's going to be kind of exhausting to have like these massive spreads with tons of panels, and you know, it's totally helped move the story forward. But I wanted to use panels to show passage of time, a variety of struggles, her sort of overcoming these fears, you know, general child fears, owls hooting in the woods, other wild animals, and she's crossing, you know, frozen water. And then again, using a different design is 2 single pages, individual illustrations. And all along the howls, the lettering is getting larger and larger until finally it's at its largest on the right side of the spread. And then finally she finds the other wolf that's been howling. And this was actually the very first drawing that I did before it was a story. I had a drawing, I think maybe, I don't know, maybe every illustrator has drawn something and didn't have a story about it, but you thought you loved that drawing so much that you wanted to turn it into a book, you wanted to turn it into a story. And that's what this was for me. It started as a picture. And I think that's why it was so hard for me to figure out what the story was, why it took me so long to make this dummy that took about a year, is because I didn't have a story. I had a picture, and this was that picture. And I was like, why is this girl? There wasn't a pup in my original picture. It was just a girl and an adult wolf in a snow-covered empty field like this. And I was challenging myself to think, what is this, what's happening here, you know, or what happened before and what happened after. And that's how the book evolved. So this remains one of my favorite spreads. And then this is probably my second favorite spread, is when you turn the page after that moment. This is another device that I used where I wanted to separate the two characters, and so I enclosed them in these circles, you know, the girl and the wolf. And that's really a lot of what the story is about how different they are, and sort of the prejudices they have against each other, but how they can break that divide and come together to help each other. So I wanted to follow up that last spread that was very dramatic with an even more dramatic moment where we see these wide eyes of the two characters, or two of the characters, that they don't trust each other, and they don't know what each one of them is going to do. So that's the last spread I wanted to share. But, you know, I just wanted to divide the book up. I think it really helped the pacing of the story to sort of change the layout, change the design, the iconography from one spread to the next, but repeat those motifs several times throughout the book. So again, it was a simple story that I just sort of, I mean, it's simple, but it's life-threatening at the same time. So
yeah, no, I mean, the pacing, the pacing is everything. And you know, you come into these really intense emotional moments and then pull back, and that sort of, did you find that an intuitive sort of thing, or did you look, I know you seem to be doing, you know, if I have a unique page design, it's like, I can't just have it once, it's got to be something that happens a couple of times,
right.
maybe. And I noticed
Yeah.
you did the circles 3 times. And you know, it was like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
I know why he released, I know why I think you did that. But or, you know, sometimes it's okay, I've got a double page spread, now I'm gonna, in a close-up, I'm gonna pull back. And sometimes it's just the story kind of naturally lends itself to that. And other times I know I find myself going, well, actually, you know what, let me rethink, because it's getting a little too much of one thing happening here. Because you really want to get that varied reading experience.
Right.
And all of us, the 4 of us, our books are like that. I've also done like Eric's Time Flies or Molly Bang's Great Lady, just almost just double page spreads. Raoul's book was like that as well. I don't know if I could do that again. That was my first book, Freefall. I look at that now and go, I don't think I could make that book again. Now there's just too much going on. Anyway, but as you know, Chris, as well, you're using a whole lot of different page designs in Daisy. Do you want to take us through some of that?
Although I was just going to say that
Sure.
Initially with Daisy, it was all full spreads. And let's see if, oh, here we go, share. So this is the first dummy of Daisy, which I also had lying around for some years, actually. I showed it to one editor who didn't think it was happening enough. And you can see initially I wanted only Daisy. This is Daisy in the first version. Only wanted Daisy to appear, and then I thought, well, people aren't really responding, so I added another character, and then added a little more action, and then showed it again to an editor, and they were interested, but not, didn't think it was quite there yet. So I developed it a little bit. What I wanted to show, this is different from what Barbara and Matthew just showed. These are all dummies. This is not from the book. So these are all various dummies, and I thought it might be interesting to see those. So then I added the girl, did the whole book kind of this way, more or less thinking I was pretty much onto something. Spent really most of a year kind of developing this, and then it was definitely killed. And so I thought, and generally if an editor has lots of questions, I just start over. I say, okay, this isn't working. So I tried a whole different approach, just make it black and white and red, add another dog. And that was a disaster. So I finally went back to my original layout pretty much, but just started, got away a little bit from the full spreads and added some more like graphic novel panels. And this finally got me to a place where I was able to tell the story, fill in a little more with the 4 panels instead of 1. You can see time happening, you can see things going back and forth. I had my heroine, well, Daisy's my heroine's friend, also the heroine, not fully involved. Her head is usually cut off. And this is how it looks in the final book. So that's all I wanted to show. Just then this, what just went by, that went over the course of about probably 4 or 5 years. So it was definitely a circuitous way to go.
Yeah.
One thing I was going to say before, as we were talking, is I think we, especially in America, we are taught to prize words above all. And when you travel in Europe, you see a lot of signage with no words. And in the United States, there are words everywhere. It's like we don't trust ourselves to just look at pictures. And, when you go to a museum, you tend to just go right for the description first, instead of standing and looking at the pictures. So that's why wordless picture books are such fun and such a challenge, because there's no choice except for the flap copy. You're on your own.
Yeah, and it's frightening for some people, and when I say some people, I mean adults, who, what do I do with this thing? I don't understand. Where are the words? That's the structure. You open the book, you read the first page, the second page, you get to the end, you're done. Okay, we've read the book. And suddenly there's this thing where, what's there to guide you? And I mean, but that's what's so fun. And you mentioned earlier, Chris, this couple of studies that I've read about where they study people, parent and a child, caregiver and a child, sharing books with text and without text. And when you sort of think of the wordless book kind of like more like free play, like you're sitting around with your kid playing with Play-Doh or Legos or something, and you're just talking. And the conversation, particularly the child's conversation, can lead things. The amount of discussion and the amount of words is just huge, in comparison between the two, the parent and child, with a wordless book than it is when someone's reading a book. And so, conversely, the book without text generates, in fact, more language. And it's, it's this freeing thing. I mean, I'm sure you've all had the responses from those kids who have some sort of hurdle between them and reading, whether it's the language, English language, or any number of things. And, you know, a teacher says, here, read this book. And those words aren't there. And suddenly there's, you know, you hear the story, he hardly says anything, you know, or she hardly says anything. And suddenly they're telling all this wonderful story, and they're just free to use their imagination and stuff. And those are the kinds of things that, you know, is amazing. You know, it's and inspiring. And it's like, do more of that.
It's really empowering. It's empowering to those kids that might not have a book in front of them that they can read, generally, you know, whether it be a language barrier or just a very early reader who has some difficulty or struggles. And that's really exciting to hear in a classroom or even at
any
home.
of you, do you have any great, you know, interesting, I know one thing kids always ask me is what are the names of my characters? I'm going, I have no idea. I never thought of them with a name, but repeatedly kids want to know what their names are, which is interesting.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think I think, you know, what you both what all of us are sort of have experienced is probably the pushback is mostly from the grown-ups, because I think, in addition to what you said, I think it requires an adult to be creative. And a lot of adults in their adult lives are not creative, you know, not like us, where we this is our job, you know, we do this all the time, but you know, it's bedtime and it's late, and a grown-up doesn't want to be creative. They don't want to so that side of the wordless picture book arena is always kind of challenging, is sort of trying to get that adult to understand that it's not that. And once you get into it, you know, once you start turning a few pages, you know, it becomes more of sort of a natural rhythm. I got sort of an interesting compliment on Twitter a few days ago that from an adult who was reading wordless picture books, and she said that she was so engrossed by Wolf in the Snow that as she was reading it, she sort of forgot that it didn't have words, you know. So and I think that comes as you get into the story. The first page, that first 2 or 3 pages can be intimidating, you know, because you're sort of like trying to figure out what the story is at the beginning, and there's no words to kind of lay it out for you. But once you sort of dive in, it becomes engrossing, you know, it becomes an experience. And it's just you just have to get past those first couple page turns, you know.
I agree that I feel like it's we take in so much visually, and no matter how much talking there is in movies, it's still mostly visual. But I think people associate words and books together, so there is a bit of with some people, a bit of a barrier. But in reality, we're interpreting visuals most of the time and doing it well. So
Yeah.
so right, if people just get over the initial few pages, they'll just be really comfortable.
Yeah, and you know, ask questions of of your kid, you know. So, well, what's going on here? And usually, because the kids will see everything in the pictures,
Right.
and I mean, again, you've all, I'm sure, done this where, you know, I'm pointing things out like, oh, I didn't see that. Oh, I didn't see that. It's this refrain where, well, yeah, look over here in the corner, you know, like put that there on purpose, you know. And kids will just go to the back of the pictures, and you know, even with a book with text, you know, a good illustrator is putting all sorts of other stuff in there. It's like the kid sees them as the story's being read to them, but it's like, does mom or dad know that that's back there? It's like a little secret, you know, story thing for them. So
yeah. I
you
think
know,
that's one of the most rewarding things, is when you put like subtleties, you weave in these little subtleties visually, that you almost don't, it doesn't matter if someone sees it or not. But you're at a school and a kid says, I saw that, you know, like without even mentioning it, you know, it's so gratifying when when that happens, and then it happens again and again and again, and it's such a great feeling that the child really spends time with your book. It really spends time with the story,
Mhm.
and is not intimidated by the fact that there's no words to explain it. It's just an experience for them, and they just sort of absorb it, you know, in a way that the impatient mind, I think, of an adult doesn't always do. So
Yeah, I love looking at religious art of the 15th or 16th century, because it's very much like the Wordless picture book, where the whole story has to be told right there. And often you scratch your head thinking, why did they put that there? Or why is his back turned like that? You can't even tell what's going on. And I like it so much to put myself into the child's position, in a sense, with older paintings that are telling a story I often don't know and have to try to guess at.
Yeah, I tell the story often. As a kid, I would go down to our local library, Bound Brook, New Jersey, public library, and I go back in the stacks to the Time Life books on art, and I would just sit and look at those pictures and Bruegel, Hunters in the Snow. I mean, there's this whole village. You could just go deeper and deeper and deeper, and there's they're skating in the pond over here, and they're going down this little path. And the Mona Lisa. Look in the back.
Mhm.
But that landscape she's sitting in front of, there's all these like roads and little mountains and waterfalls, and it's it looks like Mars more than it looks like anywhere on Earth. And I just it's like, wow, she's okay, but I want to go back there. And that's the kind of imagery that I grew up just wanting to make pictures that were filled with stories and stuff like that, and hoping there's kids out there who, and I think there are obviously, who want to find all that stuff too, which is really cool. We're at a point, I think, Courtney, are you out there? I think maybe
I am.
question time. If there aren't any, we can keep talking.
We do have some questions, and it's wonderful to see we have a fellow author illustrator in our webinar. Il-sung Na has questions for the group, and one is, do you have any specific daily routines to start your day? And the other is, do you have daily inspirations to get you going?
Deadlines.
I don't really have any routine. I think my day is sort of broken up by a walk outdoors at some point in my day. I like to go birding. I'm a big birder, so that inspires me endlessly. And just walking and being breathing fresh air always kind of gets my brain to do things that it wouldn't do if I'm just inside an enclosed space. So, but other than that, it's really just sort of dealing with one day at a time. And, it's sort of like compartmentalized by emails, taking a walk, and trying to get some drawing done. So, but in any particular order in my day. Anyone else?
Well, I've had kind of two phases, before kids and after kids. Before kids, was living in New York City. My wife would go to work in the morning. I'd get up at around 11. I might go to the movies at noon when there used to be all the repertory theaters and anything was playing at any time. And then I got back, maybe around 2:30 or so. And then I would start to work, and then I'd break for dinner and stay up with my wife for a little while. She'd go to bed and I'd stay up to 2 or 3 in the morning. That was great. Then we had a child, and I was a morning person after that. And really the kids' schedule kind of dictated where these chunks of time that I had to work. And generally the work was enough to make me want to go do it. But there's always that period where, sometimes very long periods, where I have no idea what this book is and I'm trying to figure it out. And at the end of the day, I'm no further along than I was in the morning, but you got to come back and do it again the next day. You can't procrastinate too much. The computer certainly intrudes into that that space, but it's, you know, right. That's, I come up here every day and see what I can do.
I don't have a specific routine to mention, except that I have set like work days and off work days, because they used to just all blend together. And I do procrastinate a lot, but if I really, something that can help me get to work is to set a timer just to get me started, because it can be hard to, if you're sort of stuck or at a difficult spot, sometimes it can be hard to get back to the work. But it goes, when I'm doing the finishes, that would be more of a really set routine, because it's all just there to do.
Right.
So
For me, I am kind of a creature of habit, though my habits change. But for a long time, my studio, I live in a little tiny New York City apartment. I have a small studio 14 blocks from my house. So I used to always, and still mostly do, walk up the Hudson River. I have one spot on the river where I check what the tide is, so I know that. And I get to my studio, I sweep the floor, check on my cactuses, and then have a cup of coffee and then work. But throughout the day, I always stop at 11, cup of tea, stop for lunch. I have tea at 4. I'm very strict about stuff like that. And then in terms of inspiration, I pretty much for the past many years have gone to the Metropolitan Museum of Art once a week and just go for an hour. And that's a joy. That's a great joy.
We have a participant who's asked, do you direct your pictures, or after you've sat with them for a while, do you find your pictures are leading you in terms of the story's progression?
Well, it's partly, I think, for me, probably I direct them because I generally think of the whole book. I usually have the whole book more or less in my head as I start. So, so the whole book gets refined slowly over the course of the work, rather than one image leading to the rest. That's usually how I work. So lots of, small sketches, full book, and then that gets refined. That's for me.
Yeah, I think that I sometimes get a version of that question. I think it's usually goes, what comes first, the story or the pictures? And in my experience, it's been a little of both. My preference is if I could have a fully formed plot and story before I draw. I mean, I can draw a little bit, but I don't like to just draw like and try to figure out what the story is, because that's always harder for me. That's how Wolf in the Snow was created, and it took me a year just to figure out what the story was. So I'm capable of doing it, but my preference is to be inspired by like a sort of a nugget of a story, and then it kind of comes together, and then I start thinking more intensely about the pictures. So I guess I direct the pictures. I think that would be sort of the answer to that form of the question. My preference anyway. I don't like to let it just, I feel like it's more of a challenge to me to just sort of like draw and try to figure out and just sort of let the story evolve from my drawing. I get so frustrated with that. So yeah, that's my setup.
Sometimes like a single image can be the start of a story. So then in that regard, I could say a picture can start directing me. But once I'm working on a story and I have a story idea, I definitely am trying to be in the director role of like, I want this to happen. This is happening now. How can I make what's going to happen in between to get to this spot or things like that. So definitely it is like I guess a movie director, like you're wanting to make things happen to reach certain results or goals.
Yeah, it's can go a couple of ways with me. Some stories have just sort of right in front of me, making the dummy float out. Tuesday was like that. Mr. Waffles was like that. Almost as I was drawing it, it just led me to the next page. And it was like, wow, that was great. Flotsam was brutal, was 2 years of hand-to-hand combat, going round and round and round. But finally, suddenly there it was. And with all of those cases, then that's a very rough stage. Then the dictatorial control comes in, and then but you know, the structure is there, and I can see it, and that's when I'm really plotting out page to page to page, image to image, you know, every one of those movements. But the way the story evolves, it's, for me, it's drawing, it's pictures. And there are times, I mean, I'm kind of in that stage now where I just have mountains of drawings. And out of it, I can pinpoint the point in every book where I went, oh, there it is. And sometimes there are those books that happen very quickly, and those others that were just brutal and made me go, well, why couldn't I have seen that? You know, it seems so obvious now. That's, you know, the creative process. What are you going to do?
And David, you mentioned, you know, what you're working on behind you, and we do have a question for all of you. Can you share with us what you're currently working on?
A picture book. That's all I'll tell you. I don't talk a lot about stuff in progress. So
Well, we also have a question from Henry, who's 10 years old, and he asks, how do you think wordless books can teach kids?
Quietly.
I think, you know, I'm sort of an advocate of children teaching adults, you know, so I think the idea of a child reading a book and enjoying it can teach an adult about the experience, and that it's possible, and that it's sort of an out of the box experience, but that a child just sort of grabs it and goes with it. And that inspires me, is to see and hear those kinds of stories, is when a 10-year-old like you just grabs a wordless book and starts reading it and shares it with a parent. But what can they teach kids? I think wordless books have been great from what I've been told, from what I've seen, at just building confidence in children that aren't confident readers, that aren't they're not ready for a certain stage of reading or a certain stage of language. And that's inspiring to see as well, that that a struggling reader or a younger reader can turn the pages of a book, interpret a story, and feel good about themselves doing that. So it's my abrupt ending to my answer.
I feel like, you know, when I read a book with words, it makes pictures in my head. And when I read a book with pictures, it makes words in my head. And I feel like when kids look at a wordless book, they're going to turn into like picture detectives. And, you know, they're going to see what's in the picture, what happened before, what might happen next, and what happens between the pictures. So I think it's all those to me, it's fun, but a lot of things that are fun, you learn things. So that's what I think about wordless books and what they offer as a learning experience.
yeah, it's
Love that,
looking at, you know, the importance of pictures. It's, I mean, understanding what you see is so important for anybody, and particularly now. So, you know, I think the wordless book just points up how important images can be, how profound they can be. And when, you'll often find people, oh, you should stop reading those little baby books. We have to get rid of the pictures and move on to real books that have text. And, remember that the pictures are as valid as the text, the words. That's, they're not something to be put in the toy chest and left behind.
I love that, Barbara, what you said, picture detectives. I've never heard that before. I don't know if you just made that up on the fly, but that's a really cool way of thinking about it. Picture
I'm
detectives.
gonna write that down.
We heard it here.
You heard it first.
Oh, wordless books would be good training to become a detective.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know we went over our time a little bit, but I know, David, we did that last time too, because we just
We
had
did.
so much that we wanted to share and hear from all of you. But I want to thank you so much. Thank you for being part of our exhibition. Thank you to David for curating that exhibition.
Yes.
It's just
Thank
been
you,
such a joy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great.
Been a thrill to be a part of it.
Yeah. it's
Thanks. This was
really
great. It was great to
Thanks,
see you
David.
guys. We don't get to, unfortunately, go to conferences too much anymore. So terrific to see you.
We'll be saving this chat. This has been recorded, so visit the Carl's YouTube page in a week or two, and we'll have it there. And visit our website, carlmuseum.org. You could see what we're doing in 2022. We hope you can join us for more programs. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks.
Thanks a
Bye-bye.
lot.
Bye.